After 40 days and 40 nights on the run, Israel set out from Rephidim to finally make their way up to the wilderness of Sinai. It is about a 60 to 72 mile trek from the split rock area to the foot of Mount Sinai, depending on how you plot it out. The largely rested and fit crowds would have easily made the distance in 4 days. Moses makes it quite clear that they arrived exactly 1.5 moon cycles or 44.3 days after leaving Egypt. That's Exodus 19 verse 1, where in the English Standard Version we read, "On the third new moon, after the people of Israel had gone out of the land of Egypt, on that day they came into the wilderness of Sinai." Look very carefully at this lunar calendar, because this is what Moses is saying in this important verse. Scholars who try and fudge a longer time frame fail to realize that Israel had to be in place below the mountain for the giving of the law that occurred on the first day of the week, 7 Sabbaths or 50 days after the first fruits when they left Goshen. This special date is commonly known as Pentecost, Feast of Weeks, or Shavuot. Understand that first fruits is always on the first day of the week, the day after the first Sabbath after the Passover moon. We find that in Exodus 19:16, Leviticus 23 verses 15 and 16, and then the Pentecost, Acts 2 verse 1. The whole reason the Feast of Unleavened Bread lasts a week is to accommodate the possibility of the Passover full moon shining on any one of the 7 days of the weekly cycle preceding first fruits. This fact makes it very possible that the initial Pentecost or Feast of Weeks could have occurred 51 to 57 days after the start of the Exodus. This is because we don't know for sure what day the Passover full moon fell upon. In my video, 1.5 moons to Sinai, I simply chose Passover to be on the third day of the week, because then the following 7 Sabbath rest days coincided perfectly with where they would be on the described 44-day journey. Furthermore, arriving on day 44 would give a full 10 days for Moses to go up and down Mount Sinai 3 times and thus relay God's messages to all the people. This included the instructions for the people to carefully prepare over 3 days prior to the great law-giving event. Now, if we divide the maximum distance between Rephidim and Sinai by 4, we come up with 18 miles per day for walking, and the need for 3 overnight campsites to rest. The first camp would be a few miles south of Marah, and the other 2 would be found 18 miles apart along the wide Wadi Abed. This wadi is like a premium 4-lane highway with an optimal gentle grade. There is no choke point on this route. That is why it's a great testimony for it being the correct and only way to Sinai. Whereas on the proposed middle and southern routes, we find narrow, steep paths that would make it necessary for Israel to go single file as they attempted to scramble up to the Hisma Desert Plateau. There is a dude on the net that promotes this narrow gorge near a single-lane highway. He has never been to Northwest Arabia, but he took out a crayon and started drawing routes all over the place. Really? Then there is Glenn Fritz, who in his book Exodus Mysteries simply ignores that his chosen valley after Alush dead ends 10 miles before the proposed Al-Batra Rephidim. This pass reportedly has an old footpath, but in ancient times it was considered very dangerous due to the steep hillside. We're talking about a 450-foot high wall that requires numerous switchbacks. People or animals could simply slide off to their death. Furthermore, the Exodus narrative describes how the Amalekites were chasing them from Alush to Rephidim. Yikes. You don't have to think too hard to understand that this route must be discarded, not only for these 2 reasons, but also mathematics. For when you count people moving in a single file, the maximum speed possible is only 60 people per minute. Doing the arithmetic, a minimum of 17 24-hour days would be needed to get 1.5 million people through either of these two bottlenecks. I'd submit that you would have to double that time if you add in animals and supply carts, if that's even possible to pull them up a 450-foot unstable rocky cliff. I doubt ancient carts could come apart for manual transport up the hill. Here's what 183 people per minute looks like. At this rate, it would still take over a week for them all to run up the cliff wherever possible, going non-stop 18 hours a day. The journey would be delayed, and even if they got up on the Hisma High Desert, many would be slaughtered, previously due to being pinned up against the wall, and they would find themselves very hot with no water available near the surface. So back to the real story. On the fourth day, after hiking for 13 miles, Israel began to enter the plain before Mount Sinai. They were still 5 miles from the center of camp, but the view of the summit of Mount Sinai must have been thrilling. Over the next few days, the vast crowd would begin a settling in process for the main event to come. We read that in Exodus 20. Then, several months later, a beautiful sanctuary materialized there below the peaks for God to dwell with his people.